This video is for week 8, Thursday and Friday, guided style analysis. Let's get started. So before we actually go into any activities, I want us to discuss the background and purpose of this lesson so that you can understand some of the key terms I'm using, why we're doing this. In a week or two, we are going to be writing our first essay of the school year, and it is going to be a literary analysis essay. So when we start that, I want you to have some background knowledge. I want you to understand what I'm asking you to do, and most importantly, I want you to feel comfortable with it. So let's look at a breakdown of some of these terms. Literary style analysis. You know, literary is dealing with literature, so writing. Let's look. Literary style analysis is analyzing or examining a writer's way of communication, the way that they decide to communicate their text to the reader. And then literary style. I have a really great quote from the resource Read, Write, Think. Style in literature is the literary element that describes the ways that the author uses words, their word choice, their sentence structure, figurative language, and sentence arrangement. All of these work together to establish mood, which is the way a text makes you as the reader feel, the images, and the meaning in the text. Style describes how the author describes events, objects, and ideas. I've got a link over here if you click on this Bitmoji. It takes you to Read, Write, Think, and it gives you a little bit more information. They have this really great analogy. Style analysis is like fashion style. The way that clothes can be formal and dressy, informal and casual, preppy, athletic, and so forth. Literary style is the same way. Literary style is the clothes that a text puts on. So style analysis can be incredibly daunting or intimidating for less experienced students. And I'm going to venture a guess that that's most of us. We're in 7th grade. We haven't done a lot of literary analysis in our school career yet. This lesson is going to guide you through the process of analyzing how an author creates meaning through their deliberate choices. So the lesson begins with a close examination of a writing prompt, and this will lead to understanding. I'm going to give you very directed questioning about how the author uses details and diction, and it's going to end with you guys writing a thesis statement. So activity 1, responding to the prompt. The following passage was written by contemporary novelist Amy Tan. In it, she recounts an experience from her youth. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-organized essay, analyze how she uses devices of language to relate how this experience affected her view of her Chinese heritage. Now, let me be very clear. In this lesson, you're not actually writing an essay. This is just a sample writing prompt, okay? So before we read the passage, it's important that you understand the task of the prompt, what I'm asking you to do, and you also need to think about what you already know about the topic, your background knowledge. Read each sentence of the prompt separately and discuss the questions that go with each sentence. So I've got several questions for you that you're going to answer based off of this writing prompt. This is not something that you need to stress out over. This is a practice to literary style analysis. And again, you're not actually writing an essay in this lesson, so don't have to worry about that. All right, the following passage was written by contemporary novelist Amy Tan. Why is it important that you know that the author is contemporary? If you don't know what contemporary means, it means living today or something that is modern. So I'm actually going to answer this one with you. So I'm going to take this out of present mode so that I can type and you can see it. Oops, not there. Here we go. Why is it important that you know the author is contemporary or living today? Well, I think it's important that we understand she's living today so that we can understand the full context of what's happening. If we understand that she is living today, we can also compare some of her experiences to our own. Knowing that she is contemporary gives us an appreciation for her experiences. We can see how it differs for our own lives, because it's happening to her. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. The next one I'm going to let you guys answer on your own. The following passage is still the same prompt, is written by contemporary novelist Amy Tan. It recounts her experience from her youth. In it, she retells an experience from her youth. So is this passage fiction or nonfiction? Fiction means that it is fake, it is made up, it's not real. Nonfiction means that it is real. It actually happened. So which one fits this prompt the best? And then how do you know if it's fiction or nonfiction? How do you know if it's fake or real? And then this is just a discussion question. So, there is no right or wrong answer to it. It's not black or white. All of your explanations are probably going to be different, and that's okay. How would a person's perspective about a childhood experience change as he or she becomes an adult? So a lot of times when we are kids or teenagers, we think we have all the answers. Or we think that the adults in our life, they don't know anything or they don't understand us. And you realize as you grow up that maybe your opinions about a circumstance or a topic, they change as you get older because you have more context about life. You've experienced more, or you've met more people who have different backgrounds than you had. How does your point of view about an experience change as you've gotten older and you've experienced more, or you've met new people? Here's another one. What does reading carefully or close reading require the reader to do? Well, if you're like me, maybe sometimes you like to take notes on a text that you're reading, or you like to highlight key information or words that you don't understand. Close reading requires that we pay close attention to details, or we identify words that we are unfamiliar with so that we can look them up to better understand what is happening in the text. Why do we read carefully, and what does that mean? Okay, so number 4, then in a well-organized essay, analyze how Tan uses devices of language to relate how this experience affected her view of her Chinese heritage. Let me just say this, you are not writing an essay. That's not a part of this at all. This is if we were writing an essay. But what does it mean to analyze? What do you do when you analyze something? And this goes back to slide 2 earlier in this lesson. Analyzing means that you closely examine something. You pick it apart to better understand the details or what is being explained in it. What are some devices of language? What are types of language that we use? So some language devices might include figurative language. Examples of that include metaphor, simile, onomatopoeia, alliteration, idioms, oxymorons. You also have a word called diction. Diction means word choice. So word choice is the author specifically picks a certain word to convey a meaning. I'll give you an example. So if I said that I was watching Susie run down the hall, and I chose the word run, but that's not really what she's doing. Imagine that she is more jogging because she runs slower. Running conveys the image that she is incredibly fast, but if she's slow, run might not be the exact word that matches what she's doing. Or if you said that somebody was wearing a hat in public. A better choice would be telling me what type of hat. Were they wearing a baseball cap? Were they wearing a toboggan? Did they actually have a scarf tied around their head? Was it a turban? So making sure you pick the most specific word choice to convey the most appropriate image. And then this one right here, why would a person be proud or ashamed of his or her heritage? This is an open question. There, again, like on number 3, there is no right or wrong answer for this. But let's talk about it for a second. Heritage is like the traditions that are passed down from generation to generation. So why would a person be proud of your heritage? Well, it connects us to something in history. It connects us to the past or to our ancestors. It might be something that shows our family is incredibly strong and passionate about something. But we can also be ashamed of our heritage. Sometimes we have things that we celebrate that maybe make us stand out or make us look different from other people. And a lot of people have trepidations about being different from those around them. They don't want to be seen as different. They just kind of want to blend in. And so maybe they're afraid of standing out because of their heritage. So this is just an open question right here. No right or wrong. Okay, so close reading and annotation. I'm actually going to read this with you. So follow along. You can see that the paragraphs are numbered. Let's start with number 1. I fell in love with the minister's son the winter I turned 14. He was not Chinese, but as white as the Mary in the manger. For Christmas I prayed for this blonde-haired boy Robert and a slim new American nose. When I found out that my parents had invited the minister's family over for Christmas Eve dinner, I cried. What would Robert think of our shabby Chinese Christmas? What would he think of our noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners? What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food? On Christmas Eve, I saw that my mother had outdone herself in creating a strange menu. She was pulling black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns. The kitchen was littered with appalling mounds of raw food. A slim rock cod with bulging eyes that pleaded not to be thrown into a pan of hot oil. Tofu, which looked like stacked wedges of rubbery white sponges. A bowl soaking dried fungus back to life. A plate of squid with their backs crisscrossed with knife markings so they resembled bicycle tires. And then they arrived. The minister's family and all my relatives in a clamor of doorbells and rumpled Christmas packages. Robert grunted hello, and I pretended he was not worthy of existence. Dinner threw me deeper into despair. My relatives licked the ends of their chopsticks and reached across the table, dipping them into the dozens or so plates of food. Robert and his family waited patiently for platters to be passed to them. My relatives murmured with pleasure when my mother brought out the whole steamed fish. Robert grimaced. Then my father poked his chopsticks just below the fish eye and plucked out the soft meat. "Amy, your favorite," he said, offering me the tender fish cheek. I wanted to disappear. At the end of the meal, my father leaned back and belched loudly, thanking my mother for her fine cooking. "It's polite Chinese custom to show you're satisfied," explained my father to our astonished guests. Robert was looking down at his plate with a reddened face. The minister managed to muster up a quiet burp. I was stunned into silence for the rest of the night. After everyone had gone, my mother said to me, "You want to be the same as American girls on the outside." She handed me an early gift. It was a mini skirt in beige tweed. But inside, you must always be Chinese. You must be proud you are different. Your only shame is to have shame. And even though I didn't agree with her then, I knew that she understood how much I had suffered during the evening's dinner. It wasn't until many years later, long after I had gotten over my crush on Robert, that I was able to fully appreciate her lesson and the true purpose behind our particular menu. For Christmas Eve that year, she had chosen all my favorite foods. Okay, so after we have read the story, I have broken down the paragraphs for you, and we're going to do some activities with those particular paragraphs. All right, with each section, you're going to reread the passage and highlight examples of diction and detail that reveal the author's attitude toward the experience. So again, diction is word choice, where the author picks just the most appropriate word to accurately convey how they feel about their topic, okay, to reveal their attitude. So what words are they using and what details that show how the author is feeling about this particular experience? I'm going to reread this with you. I fell in love with the minister's son the winter I turned 14. He was not Chinese, but as white as Mary in the manger. For Christmas, I prayed for this blonde-haired boy, Robert, and a slim new American nose. So I'm going to take this out of present mode so that I can highlight along with you. Now remember, you guys are in Cami, and so your highlighting tools definitely look different than mine up here. When you are in Cami, your highlighting tools are in a vertical toolbar on the left of the page. It says markup. When you highlight, I do not care what color you use. You can choose red, yellow, pink, blue, green, orange, whatever you like. Okay, so how is the author feeling in this paragraph 1? Well, the first thing that stands out to me is that she says she is in love with the minister's son. And really, her feelings for the minister's son is what affects her embarrassment about her Christmas tradition with her family, this Chinese Christmas. And I'm just going to say, reading through this whole passage, personally, I don't see where she has anything to be embarrassed about. I think that these are amazing traditions that she has with her family, and something that when she's an adult, she should look back on with love. But you can tell that because her crush is not the same ethnicity as her. He's this white boy and she's Chinese. They have these different traditions. She's afraid that he's not going to see the same charm that her family views for this Chinese Christmas. So she falls in love. That is something that stands out to me. I'm going to highlight that. Just going to pick yellow. It's the easiest. Because she is in love, she has all of this panic, that she's afraid he is going to look at her Chinese Christmas with maybe contempt or judgment. Let's keep reading. When I found out that my parents had invited the minister's family over for Christmas Eve dinner, I cried. What would Robert think of our shabby Chinese Christmas? What would he think of our noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners? What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food? So she is all of a sudden looking at her Chinese Christmas with embarrassment and negativity, because now she is going to have the judgment of somebody who is outside of her ethnicity and her heritage. So what stands out to me is that she cried finding this out. She all of a sudden views her Chinese Christmas as shabby. Maybe she didn't think that before, when she didn't have those prying eyes of an outsider watching them. She considers her Chinese relatives noisy. And I'm just going to say, most Christmases and Thanksgivings, when you have all of your relatives together, they are noisy. But that's also what makes it so much fun, is having all of your relatives together and the noise and the chaos. That's my family when we're together for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I would not change that for anything. And she's also afraid that he is going to feel disappointment seeing her Chinese Christmas. How incredibly sad that this is how she viewed her Chinese Christmas, all because she was afraid of the judgment of an outsider. So, number 5, the prompt asks you to analyze how the author's experience taught her a lesson about being proud of her Chinese heritage, and she should be proud of it. As you read, you should have been paying attention to the details about how the author feels separate or different. The chart on the next page, this is key, it's on the next page, lists some details from these 2 paragraphs, and I want you to fill out the remaining boxes of the chart to help us or to help you analyze how the details reveal their real feelings. So, I have given you the text evidence, and you've got to come up with the context and then add the commentary for this text evidence. The first one is done for you. He was not Chinese, but as white as Mary in the manger. I think that is such a funny detail and analogy that she uses. All right, so the context is this is the boy that the author has a crush on. The author has a crush on a boy who is white as Mary in the manger. And the commentary, what does this reveal about the author? What does this show about how the author is feeling? The author feels different from the boy because their skins are different colors. And that is important to her because they have this key difference. She thinks that they are going to view her tradition so drastically different than the way she views it. So the text evidence in the next one is our shabby Chinese Christmas. This detail describes, what does it say about their Christmas? You know, how does this author describe their Chinese Christmas? And what does it reveal about the way the author feels or thinks? The next text evidence is the noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners. Now this right here can be tied to, let's see, what paragraph was it? Paragraph 5. So I think what she means by they're lacking proper American manners is that the relatives are reaching across each other while the minister's family is waiting patiently for the platters to be passed to them. I think that varies according to your family. I know for us, we have like a buffet line and everybody just kind of helps themselves and we reach over each other. We're not waiting for the other person to be finished or waiting for them to pass things on to us. Like we're just kind of helping ourselves. And then in paragraph 6, the father, belches, so burps loudly. But according to Chinese custom, that's how you show that you are satisfied and that the cook did a great job. I think that's incredibly interesting. In other cultures or in other households, burping might be a sign of rudeness. But here, it's showing that they appreciate the meal and the people who prepared it for them. That's a very lovely thought. So let's go back. The noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners. What is the context of this? What's going on? And what does it reveal about how the author feels? How does she feel about her noisy Chinese relatives who maybe don't practice the same manners that the minister's family does? This does not mean that the Chinese family doesn't have manners. Not at all. It's just their manners are different than ours. Here's the last piece of text evidence. Not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food. What is the context here? What is happening? So they don't have roasted turkey and sweet potatoes. They use Chinese food for their Chinese Christmas. They're Chinese. That's okay. Would you expect anything different? According to where you live in the United States, we have different meals based off of our location. So it's really not so crazy to think that this Chinese family would have their own style food. But how does the author reveal about the fact that they are eating Chinese food and not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes that maybe the minister's family would typically have? So, using the chart information that you came up with on your previous slide right here, I want you to complete the sentence below. Through her descriptions of, what is she describing? And she calls it her Chinese Christmas. The author reveals that she feels what? What is she feeling in these 2 paragraphs? Is she feeling judged? Is she feeling embarrassed? Is she feeling ashamed of her Chinese heritage? So what is she describing and how does it make her feel? Yours is going to vary according to the way you interpret paragraphs 1 and 2. So don't worry about making it, fit one type of answer. Okay, so now we are focused on paragraphs 3 and 4. Okay, let's reread 3 and 4. On Christmas Eve, I saw that my mother had outdone herself in creating a strange menu. She was pulling black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns. The kitchen was littered with appalling mounds of raw food. A slimy rock cod with bulging eyes that pleaded not to be thrown into a pan of hot oil. Tofu, which looked like stacked wedges of rubbery white sponges. A bowl soaking dried fungus back to life. A plate of squid, their backs crisscrossed with knife markings so they resembled bicycle tires. And then they arrived, the minister's family and all my relatives in a clamor of doorbells and rumpled Christmas packages. Robert grunted hello, and I pretended he was not worthy of existence. So, just like we did with 3 and 4, let's read the passage and then highlight examples of diction and detail that reveal the author's attitude toward the experience. So you are finding words that show how the author is feeling about everything going on. So something that stood out to me was the word strange. Now, I'm a little conflicted with this. I don't know if she means strange, like, oh, it's so weird, why did she pick all this? Or just this wonderfully different menu. But probably based on how she's feeling about the minister's family, maybe it's used in a negative connotation. So something else that stood out was appalling mounds of raw food. So the word appalling, slimy rock cod. And then I want you to go through and find the rest. Do you see anything else that shows how she is feeling about all of this? When you are done with that, let's move on to these questions. Number 6, this is easy. In paragraph 3, highlight the details of the food the author's mother is serving for Christmas dinner. So we're going to be doing some more highlighting. What is she serving and how is she describing it? So black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns, appalling mounds of raw food, slimy rock cod with bulging eyes, tofu looked like stacked wedges of rubbery white sponges, soaking dried fungus back to life, a plate of squid, their backs crisscrossed. So she does a great job of describing all of the food that the mother is preparing. And it sounds like the mother is going above and beyond preparing this meal for the relatives and for the minister's family. It sounds like she has gone all out in creating this wonderful menu. And the details of it are just so spot on. So is this food a typical American Christmas dinner? That's easy, yes or no. Is it a typical American dinner? Now, I'm not asking you to defend your answer. This is just yes or no. And how does this dinner make the author feel? This is in paragraph 4. I do want you to be detailed in this. How is the author feeling about the menu the mother has prepared? Now, normally, she might really enjoy this meal. This is part of her Chinese heritage. So typically, she might enjoy the food and be really excited about it. But you have to think about it in context. How does the author feel about it since the minister's family is coming? And it's not even just the minister's family, it's Robert, who she has this, this crush on. She feels like she loves him, and it changes the way she thinks about this Chinese food. So how do you know how the author is feeling? There, I want you to defend your answer. We're still working with paragraphs 3 and 4. Fill in the blanks to analyze the effect of the details in these paragraphs. Amy Tan includes very specific details about the dinner, such as, and here I want you to tell me, what is she specifically describing? What are the foods? So we've got 1, 2, 3. I want 3 things that she's describing about the detail because she wants to emphasize, what is she trying to put emphasis on? So if we go back, we can see that she did list 3 things that the mother was making. And what does it emphasize? Well, normally, according to their Chinese heritage, these foods would be delicious and delightful, traditional, honoring their heritage. But maybe it's embarrassing to an outsider or for the outsider's point of view, especially Robert. Okay, so now we're working on paragraphs 5 and 6. So we need to reread the passage, and again, we're going to mark examples of diction that show the author's attitude toward the experience. We need to find the words or details that show how she's feeling about everything happening in these two paragraphs. Dinner threw me deeper into despair. My relatives licked the ends of their chopsticks and reached across the table, dipping them into the dozen or so plates of foods. Robert and his family waited patiently for platters to be passed to them. My relatives murmured with pleasure when my mother brought out the whole steamed fish. Robert grimaced. Then my father poked his chopsticks just below the fish eye and plucked out the soft meat. Amy, your favorite, he said, offering me the tender fish cheek. I wanted to disappear. At the end of the meal, my father leaned back and belched loudly, thanking my mother for her fine cooking. It's polite Chinese custom to show you're satisfied, explained my father to our astonished guests. Robert was looking down at his plate with a reddened face. The minister managed to muster up a quiet burp. I was stunned into silence for the rest of the night. So I feel like here you've got this back and forth between feelings of shame and embarrassment, but also feeling of pride, not necessarily just for the author, but between everybody here. The author is feeling despair at everything that's going on, but the relatives are incredibly pleased with everything that's happening. It says they're murmuring with pleasure, so they're enjoying the meal while she is feeling embarrassed. So right here it says Robert grimaced. I'm sure that was a cause of embarrassment for the author because she has such a crush on him. I want you to go through and find as many details and pieces of diction that show how she is feeling in this moment. Then number 10, we're still highlighting. So highlight the details in paragraphs 5 and 6 that show the differences between how the author's relatives behave and typical American behavior. So I'll give you some examples. Her family licks the ends of their chopsticks and then places those licked chopsticks into all of the food. And, normally we would have like spoons or forks or ladles in dishes so that we're not putting our own forks and spoons that we've personally used into those dishes. That doesn't seem to be a problem for them. Something else is the family just kind of reaches over each other and they help themselves. But Robert and his family are waiting for those platters to be passed to them. They're not reaching across each other. They're just waiting for it to be handed over. And then, of course, you've got where the father belches, and it shows a sign of appreciation and pleasure for the meal, whereas most other families might not burp because they might think that those are bad manners. Now, this does not mean that her Chinese customs show bad manners. It just shows that they have different ideas of what manners are. So how does the author feel about this behavior? How is it making her feel to see the differences between her Chinese customs and the customs of their guests? Why does that make her feel embarrassed or ashamed? And then quote the lines from the text that defend your answer. How do you know she is feeling embarrassed? What does she say she wants to do? Well, here she wants to disappear. And it also says that she was stunned into silence for the rest of the night. Okay, so we've got separation of paragraphs 7 and 8 on this page. Let's look at number 7. After everyone had gone, my mother said to me, "You want to be the same as American girls on the outside." She handed me an early gift. It was a mini skirt in beige tweed. But inside, you must always be Chinese. You must be proud you are different. Your only shame is to have shame. I love that quote. Your only shame is to have shame. The only reason you should be ashamed is because you are ashamed. Otherwise, be proud of who you are as a person. So here, highlight examples of diction and detail that reveal how she's feeling. In paragraph 7, what advice does Tan's mother give her about her heritage? What does she say about being Chinese? That is so significant. Paragraph 8. And even though I didn't agree with her then, I knew that she understood how much I had suffered during that evening's dinner. It wasn't until many years later, long after I'd gotten over my crush on Robert, that I was able to fully appreciate her lesson and the true purpose behind our particular meal. For Christmas Eve that year, she had chosen all my favorite foods. What was the author's mother reminding Amy of when she prepared all Amy's favorite foods for that dinner with the minister's family? Remember back in the earlier paragraphs, she said that the mother had made a strange menu. But it wasn't really strange. These were all the things that the author enjoyed. They were her favorite foods. Sometimes we like to think that the adults in our life, especially our parents or the people raising us, don't understand us. But you have to remember that they've been there. They grew up, they were teenagers, they felt the same things that you're feeling, and so they really can connect and understand to what you're going through. So what was she trying to remind her of when she prepared all of her favorite foods? And we're almost done. Go back to the paragraphs and highlight examples of connotative diction and fill in the chart below, paying a close attention to the patterns of diction. So I'm going to have something attached up here that goes into connotative diction, but I'll explain it to you right now. Connotative diction is the way certain word choice makes us feel. You have what's called denotative diction, and that is the definition, what it means according to a dictionary. Connotative is how that word makes you feel. So if I take the word home and I look for the denotative diction, I would open up a dictionary and it would say a place in which a person resides. But when I think of the connotative, the word home makes me feel warm and cozy and inviting and relaxed because that's based off of my own personal experiences. I had a wonderful home growing up. I have a wonderful home now. We are not always going to agree on connotative diction. Some people grow up in terrible households. They have fighting or abuse, or they don't have food. And so when they hear the word home, maybe they associate it with panic or hunger or anger. So connotative diction is a very personal way of interpreting a word and how it makes you feel. We are not always going to agree on connotative diction. It's based off of our own personal experiences. So here we've got diction, emotionally loaded words, disappointment, some other words from the passage that support the same commentary: cried, strange, appalling, despair, stunned, shabby. We have the context. This is where we describe what the author is describing. So disappointment is how she believes Robert will feel when he doesn't get a traditional Christmas dinner. The context of the word disappointment is coming straight from the text. She thinks he'll feel disappointed he doesn't have turkey and sweet potatoes. The commentary is where we explain what the diction is revealing. The author already believes that the differences between her and her family and the minister's family will cause negative feelings. So this is where we are describing or explaining the context of this word. So we give our own explanation here. Okay, so this top one has been done for you, and this bottom one has been done for you as well. So some other words from the passage that support this same commentary here: cried, strange, appalling, despair, stunned. All of these words, the context for it is how she feels and how she believes the minister's family will feel at the Christmas dinner. So all of these words, the context for it is how she thinks the minister's family is going to feel at her shabby Chinese Christmas. Those were her words, not mine. The commentary is the same as above. She already believes that the differences between her family and their guests will cause negative feelings. In this row, I have given you the word, so I want you to use the word shabby. I want you to find the context in which the word shabby was used. Explain to me the context in which she used it, and then explain what it reveals. What does it tell us about her? So here is a little different. I want you to find other words from the passage that also support the commentary from above. Find other words that show or that reveal the author believes the differences between her family and the minister's family will cause negative feelings. So you find the words, you give me the context to prove this commentary. And then you have this last row where you can find any word you want, tell me the context of it, and tell me what it reveals. You might right here want to focus on paragraphs 7 and 8 because this is where we see a new appreciation for her Chinese heritage. It's not those feelings of anxiety and shame. We see this turn in her, this evolution, where she starts to appreciate the Chinese heritage and her mother's words of wisdom. Okay, so this is our very last step. Look back at the previous activities and draw some conclusions about how Tan uses language to reveal how this experience affected her view of her heritage. And then you're going to fill in the blanks to complete a thesis statement for the essay. Now, it says for the essay, but again, just like I said at the beginning of this video, you're not actually writing an essay for this, okay? This is just pretending, getting us in the practice of writing a thesis statement for a pretend essay. You guys will be writing an actual essay in a week or two. All right. So I actually filled in half of this for you because you are virtual students, and I wanted to make sure that you could do this last part as easily as possible. So I'm going to give you some more guidance. In the passage written by Amy Tan, the author uses details and diction to reveal that an embarrassing experience in her youth changed how she felt about her family's heritage and culture by, this is the only part you have to fill in, what did it make her realize? The details and diction, she uses details and dictions to reveal an embarrassing experience in her youth changed how she felt about her family's heritage and culture by what? What did it make her realize? Did it make her realize that she really did need to be ashamed of her Chinese heritage and culture? No. Did it make her realize that her negative feelings were based on another person's response to the meal rather than her own actual shame? So you need to figure this part out. You need to make sure that you also, when you turn this in through Cami, in the top right corner, I'm not in Cami at the moment, but yours should be open in Cami. Select turn in. If you don't turn this in, I can't see your work. I'm going to assume you never did it, and then it's going to result in a 0.